Hi there. All right, I'm going to try this again. I actually already videoed this part of the process, which is the actual putting everything in the jugs. And it turns out I used a little lapel mic, but I didn't realize it wasn't actually recording anything. I think it probably had a dead battery. So round two, I may splice in some of the footage from the other video just to show the process as I go along. But it's time to actually put together our containers with the soil and the seeds. So let me walk you through this process step by step. First things first, we're going to get our soil mixture, our potting mix ready. So I have two tubs here that I bought from a big box store, the orange one a couple of years ago. I really love them. I use them both for this process. For regular indoor seed starting, I basically just use this one. But when I'm doing these bigger, bulkier potting mixes with the winter sowing, or when I'm potting up, I'll tend to use both. This is literally like just a concrete mixer tub. It was very inexpensive. This was not a lot. It's actually meant for gardening, so it has this cutout at the bottom. I really like it. It makes it easy to get in and do things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the potting mix in here, get it dampened up with some water to the consistency that we want, and then I put my jugs over here and fill 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 at a time. I can actually fit 6 milk jugs in this all at one time. It makes it a little harder to get in and do things with them, so I think for the purpose of this video I'll just do a couple at a time to show you the steps. So let's get started. First things first, potting mix is going to go in here. I use something called Espoma is the brand. It is organic, so I just use this for kind of everything when I'm potting up seedlings or when I'm doing winter sowing. That's what I've used the past 2 years when I've done this. It works really well for me. I know it's a good quality potting mix. I know there are probably others. I've heard several people talk about Pro Mix. I don't know which one of the Pro Mixes. If I was going to switch to that, which I might try if I run out of this, I would probably get the organic one. And for winter sowing in particular, you want to make sure that whatever you're using, it says potting mix. You don't want garden soil. You don't want seed starting mix. Seed starting mix is going to be too light and fluffy. Garden soil is going to be too likely to become dense and clumped together. You want potting mix. It's like the perfect, three little bears, Goldilocks story. It's the perfect fit. So you want something that says potting mix. It'll be light enough that it won't clump and become a solid mass, but it will be have enough body to it that it won't just flatten out and dry out, which is the key thing with winter sowing. You want to make sure that your stuff doesn't dry out. So we put lots of drainage holes because you also don't want it to swim in water. That's the balance with winter sowing, is making sure that your stuff's staying damp and able to freely drain, but you don't want it to dry out. Luckily, I live in, for this purpose, I live in an area of the country that tends to stay pretty damp, especially through the winter months. So what I'm going to do is cut this open. This is a cubic foot size bag. For me, what I have found the most economical is I buy this size from my local garden center in the summer when they have their thank you sale and everything's 20% off. And it comes out to be the most economical option that way. If I can't, or if I run out, then the best, what I have found to be the most economical for me is I would go through a website called Greenhouse Megastore. And Greenhouse Megastore, let me get down here, you can see. So Greenhouse Megastore has, does cost for shipping. So if I'm gonna go that route, I'm going to get at least $150 worth of stuff, because then I don't have to pay for shipping. Otherwise the shipping is really kind of expensive. And their cost for a 2 cubic foot bag, I just looked yesterday, was pretty close to what I would have spent to buy 2 of these at my local nursery. So if I feel like I'm going to definitely need more potting mix and I want to use this kind, that's going to be my resource. Or I may check to see if I can find some Pro Mix somewhere locally. I've heard that I think Walmart and other stores like that, you'd have to just look for your area to see whether or not it's available. So let's get going. Now my tub here can only handle about half of a cubic foot at a time and still be manageable for mixing it up. So I'm going to put half the bag. Also going to add a little bit of starter fertilizer. You don't really have to do this because basically with winter sowing, as soon as the seedlings are a couple inches tall, you really can plant them out in the landscape or in your garden. I know I'm not going to get on it that fast, so I'm going to put a little bit of this in there. It's a very mild organic starter fertilizer from the same company, Espoma. I know it's not going to burn the plants, the baby seeds, or seedlings, but it'll help give just a little extra nutrition because potting mix doesn't have a whole lot of nutrition for the plants. Usually, you can buy some potting mixes that have some fertilizers in them, but I don't trust generally that kind of stuff to not burn little teeny tiny baby seedlings. Maybe it would be okay, but I like to be a little more cautious. So especially with something like this that I'm not going to be paying tons of attention to other than occasionally checking if it becomes a really dry patch. Now you'll notice my potting mix is very, very fluffy and dry looking. That's because I bought this several months ago, and I purposely, when I was buying it, picked bags that looked like they had not been sitting in the rain because I knew I was going to be bringing and putting it in my garage, and I did not want it being gross and smelly and potentially picking up some mold. So mine is very dry. If you are buying potting mix and it's been sitting outside, it may be pretty wet already, and you may not have to add much water. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going through and I'm just kind of breaking up any big clumps. And you can see this is a really good quality potting mix. You can tell because there's not hardly any big chunks of wood. There are a few little pieces, but nothing big. That's a sign of a good potting mix. It's also fairly fluffy. So you can see that fluffiness comes from the, I think it's peat moss maybe, or cocoa coir, which is like ground up coconut shell stuff. That's what makes it fluffy and keep it from compacting too much when it gets very wet from sitting outside. And then the white bits that you're seeing is something called perlite, which is I think basically a mineral, like a stone that they grind up, and it helps keep it kind of fluffy. It also helps with managing moisture somewhat. It helps with like absorbing excess moisture. So most potting mixes will be a combination of those kinds of things, and you can see this is some good stuff. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to be adding water with the intention to get it to be about the consistency of like a brownie batter. You want it to be wetter than it would be if you were doing indoor seed starting, because it's going outside and it's got drainage holes in these containers that if it is a little too wet, that water is going to drain out pretty quickly. What I would rather do is start off a little wet than too dry, because you don't want your seeds to dry out. That's going to negatively affect your germination. So you want to find that balance between being too wet and soupy, but having enough moisture keep the seeds from drying out. The other thing I've already done is in my milk jugs, I've put a coffee filter in the bottom. That's going to help give a little bit of a barrier for things like slugs and hopefully keep them from trying to work their way up. It's just a very simple type of, they're kind of, I think they were like unbleached black basket filters, so just very thin paper. I don't know if it helps or not. It makes me feel better, so I put it in there. And it's a very natural kind of paper, so it's not negatively adding chemicals or something into the mix. All right, so now we're gonna put in some water. Since my mix is currently super dry, I'm gonna start with 1 pitcher of water. And so now I'm gonna just mix this up. And I'm scooping all the way from the bottom to make sure that I'm not leaving a puddle under here or having any dry patches. All right, this is close, but it's not quite wet enough yet. If I was using this to start seeds indoors, this would be perfect. You can see when I squeeze it together, it pretty much holds together. That means there is moisture in there, and that would be fine for indoor seed starting, but I want it to be just a smidgen wetter for going outside for those reasons I already mentioned. So now I'm gonna put in about 1/2 of a pitcher. Whoops. Don't put it on the floor. All right, that's pretty good. It kind of looks like brownie batter. I don't know if you can hear that. It sort of sounds like it squishes a little bit. That's good. By the way, you don't have to get things, even though these are very economical, to get a big tub like this. You don't have to. That's one of the other things I like about winter sowing. It's very budget friendly. Any kind of bucket would be just fine. You just would work in smaller batches, because what I have found is I don't want something that's too deep, because then it's harder to get down in there and really get it mixed up. So even just something like a regular bucket, which I just had one, something like this, even just like a $2 bucket from your local hardware store or that you might have in your laundry room would work just fine. There's nothing you're going to be mixing up that you can't then rinse this out and still use it for things like laundry. Just fine. You don't have to invest a lot of money in order to do winter sowing. Your biggest costs, honestly, are probably going to be potting mix and seeds, although seeds don't have to cost a lot either. And in fact, I think I'm going to make another video just talking about different seed companies and places to get seeds to help you save some money. All right, so now we're ready to fill up the jugs. And remember, our goal is to have at least 3 to 4 inches. I aim for closer to 4 because this will settle as it sits outdoors. Because I'm not jamming it in there. I want it to be somewhat fluffy so that the roots can work their way through. So I'm just kind of gently tapping that down, but I am filling the entire bottom, and that's giving me about 4 inches of potting mix in here. When I was doing this yesterday, I found that 1 cubic foot bag, I was able to fill about 11 milk jugs, filling them up this far. If you want to go a little bit less deep, I think you easily could get more, probably another couple milk jugs out of a 1 cubic foot bag. All right, so now we have our jugs. Notice again, I have numbered them multiple places, including on the bottom. That's going to help me later. Now what I'm going to do is get my seeds. And I have already made little tags. That's what I did in my first video where I was organizing. I talked about going through my seeds, going through my stash, deciding what I was going to do, and all of the seeds that I pulled out to actually do winter sowing, I have already gone ahead and made at least a couple, one or two of these tags, because I don't trust that stuff isn't going to disappear when I number it or label it. And so I'm going to stick a couple of these down in the container, and I'm being strategic. And these I have found, especially as long as you use a garden marker, so you want to use something that says garden marker. I got these off of Amazon. This is Artline brand. This one doesn't have a brand, but it's a little bit fatter. I like these for marking the milk jugs. The tip is a little bit more like a magic marker. So when I'm doing the little name tags, I like to use this one that is a little bit finer tip, so it just makes it a little easier to write. I also use this if I have something that needs to be not surface sown. So in general, when you have seeds, you're going to want to look at your seed packet and see how deep does it say it should be planted. It will say something like seed depth or something like that. This is lemongrass. It says 1/8 of an inch deep, and every company labels their packs a little bit different, so you'll have to look and see. And some don't have it on the package. You may have to go look it up online. So this is Baker Creek. Their website is Rare Seeds. I like them. This is one that I found some lady on the internet and bought some seeds from her directly that she had harvested. And I wanted to try and see if I could grow something that was a little bit harder to do from seed. This is Botanical Interests. I love their packets. They're so pretty. They're not actual pictures, they're drawings, but they're pretty. They're like art. And on here, they have it on the back right there, seed depth. Swallowtail, their packs have some information, but they tend to not necessarily tell you always how deep to plant. I like M.I. Gardner. They have really good packets for the most part. They always have a picture. They also tell you how many seeds are in there. They give you good information organized on the back as far as if you're starting inside or outdoors, how many days to germinate, etc., etc. And then usually it's somewhere over here. It shows you how deep to plant. So you want to look at that. Anything that is not surface sow or basically 1/8 or shallower, I'll use the back of my marker, that's the skinny one, and just kind of poke little holes like that to help get the seeds down a little bit. Oh, I don't think you could see that. So I'll just poke little holes like this with the bottom of my marker. It's metal. I can wipe it off, and I don't have to go get some other tool. You could also just use your finger and poke a hole. All right, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to put these two tags. I'm going to put them in the container so that I can kind of see them through the milk jug. That way I don't have to go find my spreadsheet or almost pull it up on my phone if I'm outside checking to see, oh look, something is sprouting. So I'm going to go ahead and, like, for this one, I'm just going to plant everything because I got these seeds a little over a year ago. Seeds often can go for years and still be viable, but you may lose some of the germination. Some of them may not be as viable. So I'm going to go ahead though for these, and I'm just going to plant everything this year. I did get a few of these to grow last year, but I can't remember if it was ones that I started inside or ones that I started outside. So we're just going to do all of these outside this year because last year I went way overboard with my inside and my house looked like a greenhouse. So we're going to try to scale that back just a little bit this year and be more strategic. So that packet didn't say, but the seeds were a little bit bigger. So you can actually see that seed in my hand for reference. Typically, the bigger a seed is, the more likely it is that it needs to be below the surface a little bit. So I'm going to put these down just a little bit under the soil, and then that one's ready to go. Then on my seed packet, I'm going to write down which jug I put them in, and then I'll take this back in the house and put that into my spreadsheet so that I know later on down the road where I put it. Now, sometimes, depending on how many seeds I have, I'll put two things in the same jug. And what I do for that is, let me get this where you can see it, I will kind of just mentally divide the carton into two parts, and I'll put one seed tag on one side, the other seed tag obviously on the other side, and then I know that there's two things in there. So I want to see how many seeds I have of this soapwort, because it's a lot of the seeds I'm winter sowing this year are ones that I've had for a year or two, and so I'm going ahead and just like sowing them all. All right, there's a lot of those. So I'm looking through my box right now to see if I have something that I don't have very much of that I could put in here with the lemongrass. And I'm not finding anything that looks like a great option. Oh, here. I've got a couple packs left of bunny tail grass. It's actually an annual. And I think I want to put these in as sort of a visual interest in some annual pots this year. So I think we'll do half bunny tail, half lemongrass in this container. Because the other thing that will do for me is it'll be pretty obvious which one is which if somehow the seeds kind of migrate, which does happen sometimes. You want to be careful and aware that, you know, precipitation's only coming in through here. If you get some really like strong gully washer type of rain, it may come straight in and hit the center and kind of splash things around. So there's a couple things we do. We make sure if something needs to be planted deeper, we plant it deeper. We also make sure that we tap down any seeds that are surface sown to make sure they've got good contact with the soil. And then we kind of cross our fingers that things kind of settle in before we would get a gully washer that would disturb things too much. But little baby seedlings are little baby seedlings, and they can move around. All right, so let's see what this lemongrass, it says 1/8 of an inch deep. So we don't really need, I'm just gonna make kind of like sort of a little trench here. Oh, so you don't necessarily have to keep track of how old your seeds are. Most reputable seed companies will put something on their seed pack that tells you when it was packed, what year it was packed for, and when it has to be sold by. So if it says, for example, on this one, sell by December of 2023, that means it was packed sometime in 2023, and they have to sell it by the end of that year in order to be able to kind of stand by the viability that they say that it has. Oh, there's a lot of lemongrass seeds in here. All right, so we're gonna do what's called, you know, I might try saving a few more of these. All right, so there's even more. So lemongrass is sort of like a grass. So the seeds are a little on the bigger side, and they look like this, like green almost, but lighter. I'm going to just sprinkle them all along here, and then try to kind of slightly cover them up with the dirt. And then I'm going to put a little thin layer of the vermiculite on top, and I'll explain that in a second. All right, so I'm just going to kind of sprinkle these on here, kind of lightly zhuzh it around to try to get them, at least some of them, covered with some dirt. All right, and I didn't even use everything that I had out in my hand, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the packet. So like I said, seeds can last for years, and there's enough of these seeds in here that I may never have to buy lemongrass seeds ever again. We'll see. But I've put enough seeds on there that I should be able to get a few plants, which is really all I need. All right, so then the bunny tails are going to be similar looking seeds. This doesn't say how deep to plant them, but I have some bunny tail seeds from another company, and it says surface sow, which literally is what it sounds like. You are just supposed to put it kind of like on the top. So I'm just going to kind of flatten this out. I am going to try to push the dirt a little bit towards the edges because I have found not only does the dirt settle, sometimes it tends to pull away from the edges, and then you can get things kind of sliding down in between the edge of the container and the potting mix. All right, and since I have another packet of this, even though there's kind of a lot of seeds here, I am going to go ahead and just sprinkle them all across the top of this container. All right, now you're supposed a good idea is to like press it down. So I'm going to do this kind of two ways. One, I'm going to go ahead and press it down. That helps ensure that it's making good contact with the damp potting mix, but you see it gets all over my hand. So I'm going to try to brush that off because I don't really want bunny tail grass seeds going in other pots. I'm going to mark my seed packet. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and put just a little bit of vermiculite. Now, vermiculite is another one of those things, kind of like perlite. It's actually, I think, a mineral that they grind up, but it's somewhat absorbent. And so it's used a lot in seed starting. I use it for sure on anything that I do indoors because it helps with the indoor. It helps provide kind of a little bit of a barrier on the top of the soil mix or the seed starting mix. It's not really soil. And light can still get through it enough for whatever the seeds might need. But it also can help a little bit with keeping stuff from starting to grow on the top that you don't really want, like algae. And for indoors, in theory, it might help a little bit with fungus gnats. Fungus gnats are a whole nother topic for when we get to indoor seed starting. All right, so now you've got the seeds in here, you've got your dirt, you've got your soil, potting mix, excuse me, keep calling it the wrong thing. It's not soil, it's not dirt. Potting mix, seeds, the ones that we wanted to have a little bit of vermiculite, we put that on there. We put the coffee filter on the bottom. Now we're ready to tape it. So I'm going to just use regular old duct tape. I have found that it's actually the Duck brand, got it off of Amazon. I have found that it actually starts to kind of break down a little bit by the time we get to spring, which is actually helpful. It makes it easier to get these things open when it comes time to get them open. So I don't mind that it starts to break down. That way I don't have to take out a box knife to cut them open. All right, so you need a little less than a yard. So I kind of string it out like this, and then I hook it on the side of my bin here, and then I cut it. Having this little bit of tension makes it way easier to cut with my garden snips for some reason. I'm not sure why, but it works and it makes it easier to cut it. So that's what I do. All right, then I'm gonna take and I start where it's still connected. Figure out where to move this so that it's there. Okay. So I start where it's connected, and that's where I start the tape. I hold it with my right hand because I'm right-handed, and then I rotate the jug while holding the tape still. And I just keep the tape at the height of the place where I cut the milk jug. And as you can see here, I was busy talking and I didn't pay attention. I didn't cut it long enough. No big deal. Just cut another little piece. Cut your piece bigger than you need so that it has a good amount of overlap. Normally I get my piece size correct the first time, and I only need one piece. It doesn't really matter though. And then you just want to make sure that you've got a decent seal here. It may loosen up over time. It's okay. It's going outside. There you go. That's how you get your jug ready. This is now ready to go outside. I will be placing mine on a not concrete, on a gravel area in my, around my house, around my flower beds. And because it's gravel and it's also sloped just a little bit, so when I place them, I set it down and see how much it's leaning. I don't want it to lean because then water will drain just to the one side. And I kind of zhuzh the gravel around a little bit so that I can kind of level it up. That way you have a level surface for the potting mix and the seeds, and everybody will get the same amount of water. And then I just line these up outside and we let nature take its course. So this is doing it in milk jugs. I'll be back in another video to show you how we do it in the nursery pots, but it's basically the same process. You just use a different kind of covering. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for joining me here in Aunt Susan's garden.